Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Iron Coffins, part 19. 8:30 p.m. Suddenly, the weather cleared up and the sky became visible. Radiant stars appeared between the shreds of clouds. The moon, occasionally emerging from the drifting snow curtains, flooded the turbulent sea with silver light. At some distance, an escort vessel changed its course in regular search sweeps. We veered away from the shadow, and I saw the entire eastern horizon dotted with black spots. Then the moon disappeared and the curtain of darkness fell before us. 2 minutes later, we spotted another destroyer. It emerged from a low cloud like a phantom heading towards us. A rudder command, and we steered to starboard into a white, fluffy wall. 8:50 p.m. A double explosion right ahead. We closed in, 30 minutes passed, but no contact. Suddenly, a destroyer appeared, as big as a battleship. A hard turn, and we remained unseen. Shortly after, Siegmund swung back in the old direction. However, the convoy had disappeared. Borchardt, our man with the magical eyes, spotted the shadow again first. He called out, "Destroyer, course north, distance 4,000 meters. Keep a close eye on him, Borchardt, and let me know if he changes course," Siegmund cautioned calmly, without neglecting his sector. Had we been seen or detected? We had long stowed away our cumbersome Biscay Cross. During the attacks in the Atlantic, where no enemy aircraft had been sighted so far, the bulky device was only a hindrance. Then, the shadowy destroyer vanished into a squall. It was precisely 9:30 p.m. For the next 2 hours, we raced through one of the wildest nights, through howling storms and raging snowstorms. The sea engulfed the boat up to the bridge's edge, reached for us with giant breakers, crept from astern into the tower casing, lifted us with tremendous force, and threatened to wash us away into infinity. Only our steel cables anchored on the bridge kept us on board. The boat churned the sea into foam and spray, and a large white whirlpool constantly hung at our tower. These white, phosphorescent masses of water were like a luminous comet trail that we dragged like a flag in our wake. An invitation for any vigilant foe. 10:40 p.m. It was Borchardt again who first spotted the convoy. Shadows ahead on the port side. Distance 6,500. It's the entire herd. The shadows, dots as small as cockroaches, moved along the sharp horizon that was occasionally lit by the moon. Long rolling waves concealed the parade from time to time. We approached the convoy from the southwest, and Siegmund tried to break into the starboard column. Soon, we reached a position about 4,000 meters south of the last ships of the massive steamship herd, riding the high waves on a parallel course with the wind and the sea for a while, matching the enemy's speed and calculating the attack parameters. 11:30 p.m. The first destroyer of the close escort emerged from the twilight of the night. For a few minutes it zigzagged between us and the convoy, turned 120 degrees, dashed into our wake, changed course again, and then rushed toward the end column of the slowly swaying giants. U-230 raced into the southern flank of the formation in an attack position. The close escort vessels darted in all directions, but not towards us. As U-230 completed its turn, it started to pitch and roll heavily again. The telltale wake gleamed wider and brighter. It flickered like a torch in the sudden moonlight. A shadow separated from the black background. The silhouette of a destroyer quickly grew into a monstrous shape. Siegmund turned away, steered his boat into the trough of a long swell, watched the destroyer heading south for 60 seconds, and then swung his boat around and attacked again. 11:55 p.m. Detonations relieved our tension. The race for tonnage had begun. 12:13 a.m. Another explosion. A flash followed. Star shells revealed the position of the steamship convoy. We adjusted our course and surged forward, northward, parallel with the waves. But then again, the stars went out. Visibility was zero in the trough of the long swell. The darkness was complete. "Make ready torpedoes in tubes 1 to 5 for surface attack," I shouted my command loudly in the tower, eager to fire and concerned that my order might be drowned out by the storm. 12:25. 2 destroyers came into the view of our powerful binoculars. They zigzagged anxiously in front of us. While U-230 remained nearly concealed with its low superstructure, the destroyers presented their tall silhouettes almost uncovered. Their irregular sorties forced us to change course several times, but finally Siegmund threw his boat to port, broke through the escort screen, and drove his boat into the oncoming sea. U-230 sliced through the waves with its sharp bow, glided through them, and almost submerged, rushed towards its first targets. 50 minutes passed in relentless pursuit. The boat raced through snow squalls, hailstorms, darkness, and whipping sea. Suddenly, 3 escort vessels on the port side. With a quick and hard rudder maneuver to starboard, U-230 dove into a wave trough long enough to escape. We left the 3 pursuers 600 meters astern, and 5 minutes later, Siegmann turned northward again. A searchlight signaled dead ahead. At the moment of illumination, we recognized the armada. Soon, I had a number of shadows in my night vision scope. Another 5 minutes, and they had grown into gigantic freighters. 2 destroyers crossed to starboard, 1 to port. We had joined with the starboard column of the formation. The concentration of enemy defense forces was immense. But a breakthrough into the heart of the convoy was impossible. The circumstances had truly changed. The wild pitching and circling of the boat made aiming with the torpedo targeting device nearly impossible. With puffed cheeks, I yelled to the commander in the starboard lookout, "I'll take the 4 big ones ahead on the port side." Siegmann understood, nodded, and changed course. U-230 raced into firing position, into the flanks of a shadowy column of black giants. I shouted my firing order. The boat shook slightly, and the time was 2:10 a.m. on March the 1st. The torpedo hissed towards the enemy. Would it reach its target in the wild water? The commander swung his boat around, and the shot from Tube 5 had been fired. U-230 crashed head-on into a rising sea, making any further action impossible. Then suddenly, a fireball, a hit. A second flash, a third. 3 massive detonations sent columns of fire and sparks into the night sky. Then, the flames collapsed. The ship was on fire, its derricks grotesquely reaching into the darkness. The convoy sent distress signals into the night sky, and flares rose and fell. But the storm blew the fireworks away like large shreds of burning sails. Illuminated parachutes deployed, but were instantly pushed into the water. Soon, darkness covered the battlefield astern, where the wounded freighter slowly disappeared beneath the surface. 2:15 a.m. Enormous shadows appeared ahead. Cargo ships. I immediately estimated enemy values, all firing data points. The tubes were flooded, the torpedoes were ready to fire. The commander skillfully maneuvered his boat, taking advantage of the wave troughs into firing position. 2-3 minutes, and U-230 was in an ideal position. Suddenly the column moved. The entire parade presented us with its stern. After a daring journey of 2 miles through hail and snow, we almost crashed into the stern of a freighter. A quick rudder maneuver, a turn to starboard, an approach parallel to the steamer, distance 400 meters, I aimed and fired. The time was 2:20 a.m. The ship broke apart before the bridge. It sank like a stone beneath its crew's feet. The convoy immediately began signaling frantically. Flares shot into the low-hanging clouds, briefly lighting up the night-dark sky, then being extinguished by the white flakes of hail and snow. We continued to advance, further and further ahead, and our next shot was close. 3 new explosions somewhere in the east. Other boats tore apart the convoy and divided the destroyer escort into 2 parts. Walls of water and fire rose into the night sky. While the battle raged on, we pulled away and reloaded the tubes. The men down in the cramped interior of the boat began their most challenging work. Using trolleys, cranes, and clinking chains, they hoisted the torpedoes into the forward tubes, sweating and panting. To facilitate their work, the commander changed course, placed his boat ahead of the wind and sea, and raced eastward with the convoy. Then we spotted a destroyer, a black silhouette in tumultuous motion. Our running before the wind felt like a pleasure cruise compared to the opponent's dance. Ploughing through the sea on a northwesterly course, he plunged his bow into the enormous waves, scooping entire oceans with his bow. Towering waves crashed against the bridge structures, forcing him into a dangerous list. His gun barrels dipped water like buckets. I had a definite feeling that I was safer on board my boat and had no desire to switch to a surface vessel, no matter the cost. While the storm continued to blow with the force of a hurricane, our men worked in the wet drum, staggering and dazed, to load the tubes, keep the engines running, bail the bilges, and keep the boat on the surface. The night was still pitch black. The sea had grown stronger, and U-230 pounded hard into the rising waves to re-establish contact with the convoy. Suddenly, a white light on the starboard side, 3 miles ahead. We turned, reduced our speed, and cautiously approached. Soon we recognized the white beam of a searchlight aimed at a sinking steamship. We saw a corvette stopped next to the doomed freighter, picking up survivors. This vessel was the easiest target I had ever had before my tubes. It lay there about 800 meters ahead, offering its full broadside to me. But Siegmann adhered to an unwritten code of chivalry and cursed softly, "To hell with these tin cans. I prefer freighters. Rudder hard to port, both engines ahead slow." U-230 slowly turned to avoid revealing its presence. Then a red light, small and round, suddenly crept out from behind the sinking freighter and danced like a lantern around its stern. The red dot quickly grew into a glowing balloon. Only now did we recognize a destroyer in full pursuit, an infrared searchlight focused directly on us. A command, and the diesels went to full power. Siegmann threw his boat squarely into the oncoming waves, cutting through them, diving beneath them. The destroyer pitched heavily in the high seas, rolling dangerously but relentlessly closed the distance. Siegmann, however, had the advantage of dictating the course. He zigzagged irregularly, driving the boat like a wedge into the rolling walls of water. From time to time, Siegmann shouted into the storm, "What's the destroyer doing, XO?" "He's maintaining distance," I yelled over my shoulder, unwilling to admit that the destroyer had closed the gap even more and now resembled a life-sized battleship. It pounded heavily in the high sea, but the chase continued. The wind grew stronger, the waves piled higher, delivering heavy blows to the destroyer. We secured ourselves with steel cables on the bridge and submerged beneath the mighty waves to shake off the pursuer. Minutes turned into hours of increasing tension. Finally, after 90 minutes of intense pursuit and desperate endurance on the bridge, we had lost the destroyer in the black Atlantic. Dawn broke with unusual swiftness, overtaking us between the convoy and the destroyer screen. We zigzagged through the boiling sea, keeping contact with the sweepers, playing hide-and-seek in the snow squalls, and breathing in the foul exhaust fumes of about 60 smoke funnels. 8:15 a.m. A low-lying shadow on the starboard side. A destroyer about 1,400 meters away. Red light at the masthead, probably rescuing survivors. 8:40 a.m. A large black silhouette ahead to port. Beside it, a smaller one. A destroyer detached itself from the larger shadow and crossed our extended course. During these breathless seconds, the freighter disappeared into the mist. We fired another shot. Another destroyer to port. "How many of these tin cans do these guys have with the convoy?" Siegmann grumbled irritably, made a quick evasive maneuver, and U-230 crossed the wake of the sweeper unseen. 9:23 a.m. Two silhouettes to port, tall and lumbering. A third, low-lying to starboard. Siegmann immediately swung his boat into firing position. His rough voice was carried away by the wind. "Now it's your turn, XO. The rest is your job." I aimed and barked. "Tubes 1 and 3, los!" The torpedoes were launched at full speed. The ship's fate seemed sealed. As the two fish fanned out towards the target, U-230 surged relentlessly forward. I lined up 3 more shadows in the crosshairs and prepared the remaining torpedoes for a rapid salvo. But before I could press the firing lever, the first torpedo exploded with a burst of flames. I swiftly changed the target. Twilight still hung like lead over the ink-black sea, and I looked onto a heavy target with the crosshairs. And with this cliffhanger, it's time for the after-action report. U-230 is part of a wolf pack, which, spoilers, will be pretty successful here, and we'll see how it turns out exactly next time. I looked up U-230's war diary and found a few interesting and funny things. Firstly, Siegmann's writing style is very different from Paulsen's on U-557. Siegmann is much more casual and colloquial in his wording, and he continually complains about the Biscay Cross device, which, as you know, is a radar warning receiver. Apparently it was constantly broken and worked only sometime. Same goes for the underwater microphones, which seem to give false detections a couple of times, and very early he decides to, quote, unshackle himself from the listening device, end quote, which means surface movement only. And last but not least, he also has a hot running torpedo inside tube 2, so you see, even if there are no pursuers, the service aboard was extremely dangerous all the time. And with the Air Force in the background, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I see you next time. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. I read every comment, and I appreciate your continued support. Cheers.